People have been awfully insistent that the Oaks Mall in Gainesville, Florida is a dead mall. I'm wondering if they are so eager and impatient to jump the gun that they'll ignore all nuance and time. Because it doesn't look dead to me. Not yet, at least. Why don't we have a discussion about this place? The Oaks Mall would be first announced around 1974 with the developers David Hocker and Alan Scudieri at the helm. But the mall wouldn't officially open until 1978 as it ran into problems during development. The county wanted the developers to improve road conditions around the mall as well as improve retention ponds for runoff, citing concerns about flooding as well as traffic. Finer details were not found on this matter, but I presume it was resolved some way or another. We have a lot of mall to cover, so let's go a little off topic. While poking around in the newspaper archives, I think I accidentally found a Florida man story in May 1978. It's not one guy in particular or anything insane, but I thought you might want to hear it. 5 inmates out of 9 being transported through the area were able to overpower a prison guard, steal his van, handcuff him to a tree, and escape with the van. 2 inmates were recaptured near Lake City, but the 3 others remained at large. The 4 additional inmates opted against joining the escape. One of them even sounded the alarm as they freed the guard. The van was eventually found at the Oaks Mall, and security on site did report the trio entering a department store to purchase new clothes in an effort to ditch their prison garb. Who were these 3 men? Daniel Mazak, who was in for 20 years on armed robbery, Jerry Blow serving a life sentence for first-degree murder, and then an Elias by the name Leonard Cook, whose charges were undisclosed, but his sentence was a whopping 120 years. Cook and Mazak were quickly subdued and recaptured days later in an adult bookstore robbery gone wrong, while Blow made it to Alabama before being found and recaptured there, going quietly compared to the other 2. Alright, while you're thinking about that story, let's get back to the mall. The Oaks Mall opened in February of 1978, hosting the anchors Belk Lindsay and J.C. Penney. Sears, Burdines, and Ivy's wouldn't arrive to the scene until the mall's second and third expansions in 1983. Now, what you might not realize is that the Oaks Mall was actually a mall killer. It only took one mall down, the older established Gainesville Mall, which was not as well positioned. Sears would relocate from the Gainesville Mall, leaving a rather large void in its tenant roster, and while the Gainesville Mall did cling to life for a while, it would finally give up in 1993, having since been redeveloped into a strip mall. The Oaks Mall saw its share of community events over the years, between senior health awareness and charity events, and the mall would even be the starting location of a 3-mile night run in the 90s. And while the papers didn't portray Gainesville as a very pleasant place to live, the mall would keep on trucking, doing just fine, even as Dillard's came in and devoured the Ivy's nameplate in the early 90s, taking over operations at most Ivy's stores after acquisition, the Oaks included. Burdines would also get taken over by Macy's, though this was a long time in the making as both nameplates were under the company Federated Department Stores. Macy's would gradually take over in 2004, changing the nameplate to Burdines-Macy's, before dropping Burdines altogether to become just Macy's in 2005. Company mergers, aren't they fun? As the 2010s came in, the declining Sears holdings would spin off 235 properties, Gainesville's Sears included, to a company called Seritage Growth Properties, and in 2018, Sears would close its doors for the last time. And in the beginning of that same year, Macy's would also announce it was closing its location at the mall. Macy's and Sears would close their doors in March and July respectively that year. Now, it wasn't a total loss, as the old Sears pad was quickly filled in by UF Health, whom announced a 20-year lease on the property and would reconfigure the building to their needs. UF Health would open the building for use in 2020, the building primarily being used for ophthalmology and otolaryngology departments. Pardon if I mispronounced that, medical terms are insane. Meanwhile, the old Macy's pad would be taken over by Dillard's, who opted to run a twin anchor setup and bring a wider merchandise selection to Gainesville. They would open their secondary pad in November 2018. When I arrived in 2022, I found myself looking at a rather plain but inoffensive mall. But what stood out to me is that it looked relatively well occupied and had all of its anchor pads full one way or another. And it even had a couple crowds here and there. You've got 2 Dillard's stores, JCPenney, and Belk all hanging out while the medical center at least fills a void. Is it perfect? No. I noticed a vacancy rot starting to form at the south end of the mall, and it looks like it's getting worse today. Now, people are awfully insistent on telling me that it's a dead mall now, but I just don't see that. I see problems that could bring the mall down over time, but it's not the dead mall everybody thinks it is. At least, not yet, not at this time. That said, if Brookfield Properties, the owners of this mall, can't address the vacancy rot or take measures to keep this mall viable, then a few years from now, I may be singing a different tune as your prophecy is fulfilled. Let's see, any recent stories about Florida Man in Gainesville? Well, not really at the mall, but Gainesville has had a few spicy headlines to read. Try this one. Florida Man burglar clobbered by a 65-year-old Florida woman with baseball bat. Or how about the more extreme side of things, of which I do have to alter slightly, because YouTube. Florida Man cuts off the Johnson of wife's lover with scissors. And the latest story, Florida Man steals excavator, goes for joyride, and crashes into Walmart. Yep, that sounds like Florida. So what is life like in Gainesville? Well, while I mentioned the papers not painting Gainesville in the best light, Area Vibes does give you guys a livability score of 80, which is actually kind of amazing. Great amenities, great cost of living, great health care, decent schools, at least as decent as you can get for government schools. Housing market is alright, though employment figures and crime are the weak links for this place. Now, don't shoot the messenger, but I'm gonna have a look at the user reviews since that's listed with a big fat F. One user gave it a 1, describing Gainesville as a poor town that's only good if you're a UF student, and described everyone, from backwoods families displaced by progress and university students alike, as rude, unwelcoming, and intolerant, and that if you aren't a Gators fan in Gainesville, you aren't human. Poor pay was also brought up, as well as the fact that Gainesville is a long drive away from anything else. One user gave it a 2.5 rating and described Gainesville as only good if you are a college student. I did find one 5-star review which described the Gators fan base as a great thing and noted that the restaurants in town are great and that you can find live music every once in a while. I can at least say there's a good Mexican restaurant one exit south off of Interstate 75. Again, this is just what I gathered from user reviews, so don't shoot the messenger. Tell me what is accurate and what isn't. Though with how many people gave it a 1 or a 0.5, looks like the good stats on paper just isn't enough for this place. So with all that in mind, it's time for us to go. Until next time, Gainesville, this is Doomie Grunt wishing you and the Oaks Mall farewell and good luck in this mad, mad, mad world. It's gonna be a sad day when the sunshine laws are taken off the books for Florida.